Being too good can be a fatal mistake. Dostoevsky demonstrates this mercilessly in The Idiot, where purity is not celebrated but crushed. Myshkin, a man of absolute kindness, does not find recognition but contempt. He does not lie, manipulate, or play the game, and for that, he becomes a problem. The world prefers the cunning over the righteous, the cynical over the sincere. He is not naive. He sees the world as it is but refuses to corrupt himself, and that choice comes at a price. If being pure means being destroyed, then who is truly in the wrong? The Idiot is not just a drama about a man, it is a brutal mirror of society. If the truth is uncomfortable, perhaps it's because it reveals what we spend our lives trying to ignore. Dostoevsky never wrote to comfort, on the contrary. His words are sharp blades that cut open wounds many would rather leave untouched. He did not aim to give readers a false sense of security, but to make them feel the weight of existence, the moral dilemmas, the decay of the human soul. In The Idiot, he does not deliver a fairy tale, but an unsettling portrait of society. While most writers seek to provide answers, Dostoevsky preferred to lay bare difficult questions. That is why his books do not age, they force us to look within, without mercy, without shortcuts. Myshkin, the protagonist of The Idiot, is not a character to be admired naively but studied as a phenomenon. He embodies purity in a world that despises it, functioning as a literary experiment. What happens when someone completely good is thrown into a cynical society driven by self-interest? Dostoevsky answers, without romanticism, without cheap hope. His writing does not promise happy endings. It exposes, without anesthesia, the fate of those who dare to be authentic. For those accustomed to reading merely for entertainment, stepping into Dostoevsky's universe is a harsh wake-up call. The impact of his words is akin to that of a surgeon who, instead of hiding an infection, cuts through the flesh to expose the full extent of the disease. There are no concessions, no comfort, and that is precisely why he remains so relevant. In an age of superficiality and disposable motivational quotes, Dostoevsky teaches us something fundamental. True growth only happens when we face pain without running from it. Anyone who reads The Idiot expecting a conventional hero or a comforting moral lesson will encounter something far greater in autopsy of the human condition. This leads to an unsettling question. If society rejects purity, then what does it truly value? If truth is so disturbing, does that mean cunning and hypocrisy are the real standards for survival? And if so, what place is left for those who, like Myshkin, insist on acting with kindness? This is the trap Dostoevsky sets for the reader. He does not provide answers, he locks us inside this moral labyrinth, from which no one emerges unscathed. The world was not made for people like Myshkin. He is a romantic in an era of pragmatism, an idealist surrounded by strategists. While the other characters in The Idiot carefully calculate every word and move, he acts on impulse, guided by a kindness no one understands. To many, he is nothing more than a fool, incapable of perceiving the invisible rules that govern society. But is that really the case? Or does his relentless honesty disturb precisely because it exposes the hypocrisy of those around him? Despite his gentleness, Myshkin becomes a problem. People do not know what to do with someone who does not lie, manipulate, or take advantage of others' weaknesses. To them, his purity is not endearing, it is dangerous. He disrupts the balance of the social game because he refuses to play it. He acts as if trust, love, and forgiveness are still possible, and for that, he is seen as an anomaly. His presence creates an uncomfortable contrast. Next to him, others feel exposed, forced to confront what they have lost over time. But if he is the odd one out, does that mean the others are right? Does the world punish those who act with integrity, or is the true madness in accepting this punishment as natural? Dostoevsky does not give us a clear answer, but forces us to face the question, is Myshkin naive or lucid, weak or unbreakable? Does the world have a point in rejecting him, or is he the one who truly sees reality as it is? The greatest irony is that by calling his protagonist the idiot, Dostoevsky compels us to consider who truly deserves that title. The novel challenges us to decide where we stand because, at its core, this story is not just about Myshkin, it is about anyone who has ever wondered whether it is worth being truthful in a world that rewards deception. If society ridicules purity, then perhaps the issue is not just about one man, but about a larger system. How exactly does the world react when someone refuses to conform? The label of idiot placed on Myshkin is more a reflection of society than of his own actions. He is called that because he does not lie, deceive, or manipulate. But if these are the criteria for being considered naive, what does that say about the world around him? Has cleverness become a prerequisite for being taken seriously, while honesty has become a liability. If so, does this mean intelligence and sincerity cannot coexist? Or has society simply created a system where being truthful is a luxury few can afford? This is the central dilemma. Is Myshkin, who refuses to take part in a corrupt game, a fool? Or are the real fools those who accept the rules without questioning them? Many take pride in knowing how the world works, but does living by these rules make them wiser or just more conformist? At its core, Dostoevsky forces us to confront an uncomfortable question: what holds more value, integrity or adaptation? This rejection of purity is not confined to fiction. In real life, how often are good people treated as fools simply because they refuse to act with cynicism? In the workplace, in relationships, in politics, those who refuse to engage in manipulation are often cast aside. This leads to an inevitable reflection. Is kindness a mistake, or is it an act of resistance? If Myshkin disturbs people so much, it is because his existence exposes something society would rather ignore. When someone refuses to give in, they don't just challenge the system, they force others to look at themselves. And perhaps that is why society reacts by ridiculing, marginalizing, and pushing them away. Purity doesn't just stand out, it reveals. Dostoevsky wrote, "The Idiot for a society in crisis, caught between tradition and modernity, faith and nihilism, order and revolution." 19th century Russia was in turmoil, its aristocracy weakening, new ideals gaining strength, and orthodox faith losing ground to skepticism. It was a time of transition, where no one knew what the future would hold. Myshkin was born into this in-between space, a man who symbolizes Christian kindness in a world that no longer has patience for it. He does not belong to the new world that is emerging, nor does he fit into the old one. His presence only reinforces the discomfort of an era uncertain of its direction. This existential crisis is not unique to 19th century Russia. Throughout history, societies have faced transitional periods where old values clashed with new ideologies. And just like in the past, those who fail to adapt quickly enough are left behind. Dostoevsky understood this sense of displacement and transformed it into flesh and blood in the figure of Myshkin. Perhaps that is why The Idiot still resonates so strongly today. In an age where superficiality thrives and authenticity is often punished, Dostoevsky's work remains a stark reminder of what it means to be truly human. Myshkin does not simply exist within society, he interacts with it in ways that expose its contradictions. He is not just a good man, he is a good man in a world that does not know how to handle him. His actions, choices, and even his vulnerability only make sense within this larger context. He is living proof that psychology cannot be separated from the culture in which it exists. This still holds true today. Understanding the human mind without considering the social environment is a mistake. We are shaped not only by biology or individual experiences, but also by the era we live in. The rules we follow, the values we absorb. Dostoevsky understood these dynamics long before modern psychology. That is why reading his novels remains so revealing. But if Myshkin embodies such psychological complexity, an inevitable question arises: what is the fate of a man like him? What happens when someone so pure is placed in a world that does not accept him? His tragedy is not the result of his own failures, but of the world's inability to accommodate him. He is not rejected for being cruel, dishonest, or greedy. On the contrary, it is his absolute goodness that seals his fate. In a world where cunning and manipulation are necessary for survival, someone who refuses to play the game is bound to be cast aside. Worse still, his existence does not merely disturb people, it disarms them. Cynics do not want to be reminded of what they sacrificed in order to adapt. Myshkin has no declared enemies, but neither does he have true allies. He does not inspire loyalty because his goodness offers no promise of advantage, making him disposable. People approach him out of curiosity, even fascination, but rarely out of genuine understanding. He belongs to no group and fits in nowhere. His tragedy is not just loneliness. It is the realization that purity is seen as a burden rather than a virtue. This pattern is not confined to fiction. In any environment, from social circles to the corporate world, those who act with absolute honesty are often seen as naive, if not as obstacles. The world does not reward emotional transparency. It punishes it. Many recognize this early on and adjust accordingly. But those who insist on staying true to their essence often find themselves isolated. And perhaps this is Dostoevsky's greatest provocation. Is it possible to remain pure without being crushed by the system? If purity is so unsettling, it is because it carries a weight few are willing to bear. Being truthful requires a strength that most people lack, and in the end, the world finds ways to eliminate those who insist on such a path. In Myshkin's case, his downfall is not due to personal failure, but because his mere presence serves as an uncomfortable reminder that perhaps the world is wrong. This leads to an even deeper question. Was his destruction inevitable, or will a pure man always be crushed in a world that values cunning? His downfall is not an accident, but a logical consequence. A man who refuses to manipulate or deceive cannot thrive in a world where these skills are essential. Those who play fair are always at a disadvantage against those who have no scruples, and Dostoevsky forces us to confront this reality without romanticizing it. Being good is not enough to win. In many cases, it is precisely what leads to defeat. But why does the world punish purity? Because it makes people uncomfortable. When someone acts with absolute sincerity, they unintentionally expose the masks of those around them, and no one likes being unmasked. Emotional transparency challenges power structures built on manipulation. And what happens to those who refuse to conform? They are ridiculed, excluded, discarded. This logic has not changed. In any society, vulnerability is exploited rather than respected. In the workplace, sincerity is often mistaken for a lack of strategy. In relationships, transparency is perceived as weakness. In politics, those who speak the truth without filters rarely make it far. The system favors those who know how to play the game, not those who refuse to participate. This is the great irony. Those who maintain their integrity are seen as naive, while those who adapt and manipulate are considered intelligent. What does this say about society's values? If survival depends on masking emotions and hiding intentions, what is the true cost of authenticity? If Myshkin's fate seems inevitable, then perhaps the real question is not about him, but about us. If society always rejects those who refuse to play the game, what does that reveal about the world we have built? Myshkin's tragedy remains relevant because the mechanisms that destroyed him still operate today. Society continues to reward cunning over honesty, manipulation over transparency. How many times have people felt the need to hide their true essence just to be accepted? How often has authenticity been seen as a mistake? The Idiot is not just a novel about 19th century Russia. It is a chilling mirror of the modern world. Today, we live in an era where image matters more than truth. Social media has turned life into a grand spectacle where sincerity is a risk and showing vulnerability is a mistake. Those who, like Myshkin, express their emotions without filters quickly become targets of criticism, disdain, or even cancellation. As always, Dostoevsky had already foreseen this dynamic, and the most unsettling part is that even knowing this, most people continue to play along. Why? Because those who refuse to participate are left behind. The world has not changed much. It is still a place where cleverness triumphs over honesty, where those who lie best often win. The only difference is that now, the rules are more subtle, more sophisticated, yet just as ruthless. This leads us to a dilemma. If the world has always favored those who know how to manipulate, does that mean there is no place for those who choose to act with integrity? Or are there alternative ways to survive without giving in to cynicism? Dostoevsky presents the problem, but the solution, if one exists, is ours to find. And here arises a paradox. Did Myshkin truly fail, or was it the world that failed him? Perhaps the real problem lies not with the protagonist himself, but with the structure that condemned him. The great paradox of Myshkin is that, despite constantly being called an idiot, he is in reality the most lucid of them all. He sees reality without the distortions of ego, without the need to manipulate or deceive, but this clarity is precisely what makes him unbearable to others. In a world where everyone wears masks, those who refuse to do so become a problem. Myshkin is not unsettling because he is naive. He is unsettling because he is true. This leads us to an uncomfortable question. Is corruption truly inevitable? Society teaches us that adaptation is necessary, but what if it isn't? What if true strength lies in remaining whole despite the circumstances? Dostoevsky does not offer easy answers. He only forces us to confront this question. The most curious thing is that Myshkin is not naive in the traditional sense. He perceives the social game, he understands the rules, he simply chooses not to follow them. However, that choice comes at a high price. Absolute goodness is not seen as a virtue, but as a weakness. People do not tolerate those who act without ulterior motives, because it forces them to question their own. Myshkin's true dilemma is not a lack of cleverness, but his refusal to accept that cynicism is the only option. This conflict remains as relevant today as it was in Dostoevsky's time. Is the only way to survive to accept the rules of the game, or is there another path? Dostoevsky provokes us, makes us question, but never provides a ready-made answer. Perhaps that is why Myshkin's journey so closely resembles that of messianic figures. He is not just a pure man, he is an archetype, a challenge to the very structure of the world.